Hello everyone, I am Tass, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives for the Jennies in the Sky with Diamonds event, which the winged donkeys add to the game. So this week we have 1.5 billion teams to go over. Luckily, a lot of the game modes actually have overlap. For example, even though we have a faction event this weekend with a new Delve variant and everything, it is the same green-red restriction on this weekend event as it is on this Tuesday faction event. So a lot of them have quite a bit of overlap. And of course, there's also quite a bit of overlap between the current Journey event, which is a very annoying Centaur restriction, and the Underspire, which is Deion Fields. Even though those are two completely different restrictions, Deion Fields is pretty much all Centaurs and vice versa, so a lot of pretty similar teams, though there are a couple switch-ups based on what you do get access to from the two different categories. We will have a lot of teams to go over, however, I won't be re-mentioning the Haunted Holiday event. This is, of course, for the current Halloween event. This is all the purple teams. I covered a video on it last Friday, so reference that if you want to go and get any of the copy paste for them. Otherwise, everything else will be in this video right now for everything this week. But if you haven't already been doing it, this is the first time that the event has come in on not a Monday, ended up coming in on last Friday. So if you haven't done any of it yet, you have missed out on a few days. It is a daily you want to be doing every single day in order to get the full loot. However, there's still plenty of time to get every single reward from it. So even if you have already missed a couple days or do in the future, just make sure to get as many of it in as you can daily and get all the rewards that you seek from it. Anyways, let's start going through all the things, starting with the very useless glory troop that we end up getting this week. As far as this troop is concerned, it deals some damage to the first enemy, knocks them to the back, and then destroys a random column. Overall, for 11 mana cost, there's just way better things out there. Does have mana link, does have immune to stun, but I don't really foresee a single instance where you're really going to be able to utilize this much. There are some things like maybe this Thursday class event where you can kind of put one or a couple on your team, but beyond that, for the mana link and everything. But beyond that, there is pretty much no use case for this, unfortunately. Similar to many Centaurs, Centaur is a really, really weak category, which makes a couple things this week a little bit annoying. As far as the event key table is concerned, this is actually a pretty important event key drop table if you are missing Artima. The main reason for this is she's probably going to be your best damage source for a lot of the events this week, most notably for the current Journey event, if you do not have something like a Ward Breaker. Of course, you can just opt for just spamming the new troop, the new Journey troop. However, Artima is going to be your next best option after that, so you might want to end up opening event keys for this week if you don't end up having it. Beyond that, as far as things that are not in drop table, this includes the 5 faction troops from the Wild Court, the current invasion troop, or sorry, the current Journey troop, which is the Centaur, which you'll need for the Journey event, and then, of course, the Immortal Sagittarian, which is only from the Burning Chest drop table from PvP. So everything else that you see here is, the main thing you would ideally want to end up getting is a Ward Breaker, but given that there are 2 other mythics competing for it, it is very unlikely you will specifically get that, but there's a chance, as he will help with quite a few things this week. But overall, I would say it's pretty skippable unless you're looking to opt for more damage sources, most notably like Artima, or in some cases even a second Atlanta, if you only have the free quest one. If it's Centaur if you don't have it, as it does have insta-kill, pretty much the only thing here that does, so if you want to like upscale and Underspire this week, it could be a way to do so. I don't actually show it on either teams, but it is something that you can end up incorporating if you want to upscale, though it is pretty inconsistent with its Devour rate, but once it does start going, it tends to do pretty well. Anyways, the most annoying thing this week is definitely the Journey event. You do get double magic and 3 times score for using the Centaur. If you are lacking every single option, like you don't have Artima, especially if you don't have Ward Breaker, you are probably going to want to double up on Centaur. Go like 2 Centaurs, potentially even 3 Centaurs, and just run hero with a resummon weapon. If you don't have a resummon weapon, well, you should have a resummon weapon, but if you don't have this specific resummon weapon, which does gain barrier and bless while having resummon into a tanky unit, you can use any of them. And if you happen to not have any at all, something like Wand would probably still be fine. But basically, you want to spam as many Centaurs as you can, so you might want to buy 1 additional tier above whatever you normally would in order to double up, triple up. Unlike things like Bounty Hunter, you do not get penalized in Journey event for using multiple of the Journey troop. You do have to use 1 in order to get your multiplier. However, using 2 or 3 does not give you any bonus, but it also doesn't give you any downside. So she's most likely going to be your best damage source if you are missing the Ward Breaker. Otherwise, Ward Breaker will definitely be your best option, as he has a lot of damage per cast, ends up getting a lot of mana accumulation back, and even though he has a really high mana cost, he pretty much gets it back and some with his ability, while also scaling a little bit with his random stats over time, which will ideally go into magic for even more damage that he gets to do to everything. But otherwise, spamming Centaurs and offsetting any Centaurs you don't have with Artima is going to be your next best bet for taking out the event. I generally don't show Artima as a low rarity thing, I mean Legends as a low rarity thing, But this is one of those few weeks, given that's an event key drop table and everything, where if you don't want to buy the extra zebra tars, it's probably going to be your best route, basically spending some extra event keys instead of extra gems if you still need to go and get them. Otherwise, just throwing extra gems to get an extra tier from the rewards, probably your best bet. Normally, you just want to go to about tier 3 or so in order to get the weapon, but of course, you could go for the tier 4 and be able to run double zebra tar, triple zebra tar, as it's going to be one of your best overall damage options if lacking World Breaker. So that's pretty much how that's going to go. As far as Journey is concerned, you just take the higher level. So in this case, just always take highest one and you'll be able to get the maximum amount of points. So just keep doing that over and over again until you complete it out with your guild. And of course, you get a lot of deed books, in this case yellows, if you need them for anything. So beyond that, of course, we mentioned it earlier. The Halloween event, we covered a pretty comprehensive video on it last Friday, which will be linked in this video as well at the end. However, if you haven't already seen it, basically just run purple teams, whatever you want to run, Thrall, Leprechaun, a billion, Pharaoh, Cafrus. In the Stellarex, obviously this is an ultra expensive deluxe team, but simple things, just as simple as like Thrall, Leprechaun, whatever will get the job done. Just put your best damage source that's purple with Thrall and Leprechaun, you're going to be good to go, or just go all out with something like that. But pretty straightforward. You just keep doing your battles, make sure to buy 50 gems per day in order to go and end up getting the basically double amount of battles, and this will allow you to get all the good rewards. The good rewards being 1 witch armor, 1 of the haunted doll, which I will be covering a team for in this video. I also plan to do it a little bit more on stream tonight here on the channel at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you want to see more with that, we will be doing a bunch of team building, messing around with it. Not sure if I'll bother covering a separate video on hers, which is why we'll be covering one during this video. However, she's okay. 4 times terror, not bad. One of the better terrors in the game while having mana accumulation, full heal onto herself, highest dodge rate in the game while having spell reduction. She's basically a mixed tank, but instead of having skull reduction, spell reduction, she has skull dodge spell reduction, which allows her to dodge on skull effects like Death Mark, Freeze, other similar things. So ends up working out pretty nicely. Very situational though. But yeah, 1 witch armor, 1 haunted doll, 6 of the pet, 5 to get the normal one, and then 1 for the golden, and then 1 power orb. I would say the highest priority is getting the pet, as the golden pets don't really return, and if they do, it's like money locked. Haunted doll will be available in a few months from now, early next year. Witch armor will be available again next Halloween, and orb of power you can get whenever. However, this is the cheapest you can ever get it for only a couple hundred gems. But just keep taking whatever battle, keep taking the upgrades so they keep getting stronger as long as you have the stats to do so, and you'll eventually have all the good rewards in the shop, or whatever you want to end up targeting for. Beyond that, other things that we have going on this week include this Tuesday, we're going to have the faction event for Wild Court. Keep in mind, this restriction is actually the same one for the one we have this weekend of green-red. So aside from the pure faction team, you can pretty much just copy-paste whatever team you're going to run. I did show a couple different ones, so we have a couple for different... I believe I did double up on Rowan build, just because Rowan is just so solid at the lower range. But yeah, you can literally just use whatever you used tomorrow or Tuesday faction event for pretty much Friday faction event, so it works out pretty nice. Wednesday we have the Deion Fields pet. Thursday we have, or actually Centaur pet, I mean. Thursday we have the class event for... Oracle. Oracle's pretty underwhelming. You really only use it on weeks like this where you're forced to use 4 times Centaur teams. Keep in mind, if you want to get the full amount of gem spawn from the why do I always forget this? I keep wanting to say invasion. If you want to get the full amount of points from the current journey event as far as the gem spawn for your troop, you're going to need to set your class to Oracle. It's because your hero class needs to be Centaur in order to get the full gem spawn. And for it to be Centaur, it has to be Oracle. It is the only Centaur hero class in the game. Beyond that, you are basically never going to use this hero class beyond this week. It is pretty much only ever brought out for Deion Fields event weeks, like now, and then you'll never do it again. And this Friday, we have another faction event, but this time it'll be bringing in a new troop, this one right over here, for the Labyrinth, which of course will also be the Labyrinth faction event. Doesn't really do anything too good. The things that are already in Labyrinth aren't really going to change the 4 times faction team you're going to run. So it doesn't really change up the meta at all. It does have an okay damage poke, but at 500 faction, just doesn't have enough to really do much. Deals magic plus 3 splash damage to an enemy, so 50% to adjacents, and is boosted by its attack at a 2-to-1, and it knocks them to the back. Overall, compared to other things within the place, like most notably the silence spam, you don't really want to be using this. This doesn't really have any utility. It does have a little bit extra damage, but damage is not really your concern on the final fight. It's mostly not dying, and particularly killing out their tank before your tank dies, and she does not really help much with that. I guess a little bit if you want to like target directly with it, but you could easily do that with the silence troops and just go slightly slower but have the benefit of silence. And oh yeah, one other thing to mention, this is the second to last week to complete out the current campaign, so if you haven't been working on that, still plenty of time to do so. 2 weeks is more than enough to end up completing out everything for the campaign. Overall, campaign was pretty average this time around, nothing really too over the top. We will have the Mythic course next week, which we'll be going over, and it just doesn't really do much, though. We ended up getting a legend before the season even started that was basically like this, that little fox thing that had the Entangled Gem and everything. So overall, it's not really particularly anything unique. It does have Impervious into like some Entangled Gem spawns, but that's not really enough to redeem it as being good. It's like a utility thing you'll probably use in some restrictions, but overall, probably won't ultimately see too much usage. As far as Soulforge is concerned, we do have the green Celestial Dragon. So if this is one of the things you've been needing for Stellarex, congrats. You've finally gotten it, or will soon, once you go get all the other components and everything. But yeah, green Celestial Dragon, really great. Beyond that, as far as Soulforge is concerned, we do have Wild King. Wild King, really good overall skull option, among one of the best in the entire game. He enrages all allies, which not only allows them all to hit through skull, but also gives them 1.5 times damage on their next skull poke, and then creates a mix of skulls and yellow. This is really good if you're doing a game mode where you don't care if your team dies, but only care about overall damage output, as this is really, really, really good at doing that, because as when your allies die, well, you just basically get a free new enrage, because that troop didn't lose their enrage yet. They'll have it, they'll do extra damage, everything's been gaining attack and stacking it over and over again. So sometimes your first slot dying actually increases the amount of damage that you're going to be doing, rather than reducing it. So it's really good in game modes where it doesn't matter if you lose your troops and you only care about how quickly you can win with skulls, and is among one of the strongest things skulls have as an option these days. On top of that, he even gets Bone Storm at start of battle, and even gets a little bit extra bonus when used with Wild Folk. Beyond that, let's see, this is the one I always mess up, is the other Pharaoh. I always want to mention her, she's pretty useless though. And yeah, same as the rest of Soulforge. As far as weapons, nothing too noteworthy, however, I do believe I use Eye of Orion on the low rarity team. If you're missing like every resummon for Underspire this week, this is going to be your go-to option. It's available in Soulforge, explodes all yellow, grants a random status effect to all Divinian Fields allies, which is your restriction for Underspire, and then summons a Divinian Fields troop, which will help tank for you. So if you're missing pretty much every option, you'll be able to use it for that. Unfortunately, you cannot use it for the Journey event, as the Journey event is specifically Yellow Centaur, and that does mean your weapon is restricted to yellow. However, the Underspire is only to Divinian Fields, so given that this is a Divinian Fields weapon and a Divinian Field week where you can craft it, it is pretty easy to obtain compared to normal, so it'll probably be your best overall tank option if you're lacking pretty much everything else, as well as just in general from this place if you don't already have it, as it lacks quite a few other options that are even remotely good. Anyways, let's start going over all the teams. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, all the purple teams are from the video we covered on Friday, just to not bloat it too much, as we already have a dozen teams to go over. So let's start getting into them. So, Yellow Centaur, this is for the current Journey event. Obviously, you have to use one Zebrator, and this is just for the 3 times miles. You don't get penalized for using multiple, however, you do have to use at least one in order to get your 3 times miles. Beyond that, we're actually not even using her for her cast in this particular setup. What we're doing is using Mechanist class, so we have the barrier as well as Dispel, as well as 50% mana start to get everything rolling. We're using Wand because why not? It is a Yellow Centaur, so you're allowed to use any yellow weapon from any location in this particular game mode, so we're just going Wand route. We're doing this in the Ward Breaker. Ward Breaker is going to be your best friend for this event. If you have double Ward Breaker, you can even double up on Ward Breaker if you want. In this case, I'm doing it a little bit cheaper with an Astral Spirit, so we can have some board control. And of course, if you're really lacking options, you could literally just go all Zebratars. There are a lot of situations where this is probably going to be your best bet, and just running triple Zebratar with your best mana accumulating yellow weapon is a perfectly valid way to end up winning out this event. And we kind of somewhat do that for this one, where I ended up using placeholders of Artima because I didn't bother buying an extra tier for it. However, of course, you can replace every single Artima that you see here with Zebratar, and basically your team would be Zebratar, whatever yellow explodey resummon weapon you have. In this case, I'm running Flail of Guard because it's Bless and Barrier, but if you don't have this, run anything you have that is yellow that can resummon and explode for mana accumulation, because you need that mana accumulation. She will kind of do it on her own, but having a little bit extra is always nice. But the most important thing is that resummon and it being yellow, as you can't use it if it's not yellow. And unfortunately, there's not one in Soulforge this week, so even though there is Explodey weapon in Soulforge, there is not a yellow Explodey weapon in Soulforge with the resummon, so a little unfortunate, but hopefully you have one from a past event, because that's probably the highest rarity thing in this team. Beyond that, yeah, you just go triple Zebratar. Zebratar in first slot, third, fourth, Otherwise, if you don't want to go and spend the extra gems, you can offset them with Artemas. And of course, if you have Ward Breakers, obviously also use the Ward Breakers, and you can also offset with them. And you do have to use Oracle if you're going to be doing it this way. As I mentioned earlier, in order to get our full boost ratio, you do need a full team of Centaurs, and the only Centaur hero class in the game is to use Oracle. Overall, Oracle doesn't really have too much going for as far as perks and everything else, aside from maybe like a little bit extra magic there, which will help her a little bit for extra damage. Another thing that will help her for a little bit extra damage, if you have the resources to do so, is if you end up giving her her elite level, she gains 4 additional magic, as well as a few other stats from being upgraded. And given that she has double magic, that is technically 8 extra damage every single time she ends up casting. So it's not a lot, but given how many times you're probably going to be clicking her, if you're using her as your primary damage source, it'll definitely speed things up over time, having 8 extra damage per cast. So it's something worth considering if you have the upgrade tokens to do so, which you'll need the epic ones to end up doing. Or use the ultra rare to get the first level. Anyways, as far as faction teams, you're allowed to use any colored hero weapon, and the restriction for both Tuesday and the weekend event, while being different factions, are the same color of green-red. I think this might actually be the first time this has ever happened, where it's the exact same color, unless I looked at them wrong, but I'm pretty sure they're both green-red. Labyrinth green-red and Wild Court green-red. So, yeah, very similar overall team builds as far as what you end up running for it. As far as lower rarity is concerned, we end up going down the Rowan quick kill route, just running with Black Manacle, everything else. For the higher rarity one, we're going pretty much just feed mana into insta-kill option. In this case, we're just using Zolgoth as our main kill, but of course you can do that with anything that fits within the restriction. As far as pure faction is concerned, we're going down the Wild Knight into Wendigo. Basically, Wild Knight is enough to solo the entire battle on its own. It's one of those that pretty much has everything you would ever want from a Underspire faction team or faction troop. Not only does it end up Hunter's Marking whenever it takes skull damage, allowing it to hit double skull damage, it has 33% skull reduction, so it'll be tankier. It explodes a gem, so it has board control and mana accumulation. It gains a bunch of life and attack, which not only keeps it alive, but also gives it the attack value to go with its double damage that it will effectively be doing on most units. And on top of that, it's also boosted by Green Destroyed, so you'll gain even more stats on that at a pretty good boost ratio. And if all that wasn't enough, he also gains Barrier, so he truly never dies. The second Wild Knight here is somehow if the first one dies, somehow, I have no clue how. Otherwise, you just go basically spam Wendigo just to get some extra Hunter's Mark and a little bit of chip damage. There isn't really a good mana accumulation option here. There is one, but for how much mana it costs to end up casting it relative to how much it gives you back, it's pretty much mana neutral a lot of times, so it's not really worth casting, and it's better just to have the second Wild Knight in case somehow you lose one. And yeah, just solo with the Wild Knight, basically. Oracle hero class event. This is specifically Centaurs from Deion Field. Sorry, never mind. This is just Deion Field. You're allowed to use anything from Deion Field. For this... Oh, no, sorry. I was right the first time. It is Centaurs from Deion Field. Too many game mode restrictions. It's kind of funny because this week we have a Centaur restriction, a Deion Field restriction, and a Centaur from Deion Field's restriction. So we got the whole range. But yeah, this is Centaur from Deion Fields. It was right the first time. For weapon, I'm just running Dawnbringer. If you don't have Dawnbringer, run Dancing Daggers, which you get from 250 wins on Drifting Sands hero class. Herdmaster, we're just doing, or all 3 of these, we're just doing for their yellow link. I just had 3 different ones just so we have a little bit extra variety here. This guy for cleanse and a bunch of explode. This guy for poke damage. And this guy for a little bit of mana accumulation. However, you're using all these just for their yellow link. And I guess the fact that you get a little bit extra bonus stats from doing this. So unfortunately, none of it is magic, which is not ideal. As you get all these bonuses, but not a single one is actually useful for the game mode. Anyways, as far as Underspire is concerned, this is a Deion Field restriction. Main noteworthy thing about this is you're not restricted to Centaurs, unlike the other game modes. So you're allowed to use absolutely anything within Devinion's Field. This opens up a few strategies that you wouldn't have been able to do specifically for the Centaur event. Or for the... Gosh, why can I not remember that name this week? For the Journey event, you'll have a lot more options compared to it because there are quite a few handful of things in Deion Fields that are not purely Centaur, even though it is the Centaur-based kingdom. For this first team, we're basically just running a bunch of mana accumulation and a Ward Breaker. I have double Ward Breaker here, but obviously if you don't have double Ward Breaker, you can offset for either just more mana accumulation or whatever other damage source you want, like the Artima as we showed earlier. But otherwise, you just spam Ward Breaker until you win for the higher rarity team. For the lower rarity team, it's a little bit of a faction mix. We're running Wild Knight in order to never die, for the same reason why it doesn't in faction is the same reason why it won't in Underspire. Has a lot of overall durability. has a barrier, has board control, has score reduction, has a lot of overall skull damage. And while he does fall off a little bit at like 500, or not 500, but you know, in like floor 6, once you're in like the final section, it will still do a lot of overall value. And given that he can already be ran for 500 pure faction, it should be perfectly fine to run him in zone 6 as well. He's really bulky. In case he somehow does die, we do have Eye of Orion here. This you can get in Soul Forge, as we mentioned earlier, and has a bunch of mana accumulation and resummon. So even if this guy dies, you still have infinite resummon over into first slot. And the Atlanters are just for damage pressure. One other thing to consider if you don't want to go down the Atlanta route, which is a little bit more luck-based and a little bit mana conflicting, however, does have insta-kill, is Centaur again. A really good overall troop from this place, and one of the few things, if you don't currently have, you might even want to event key for. It's most notably used for Zolgoth, and I guess technically these days also Immortal Ossifer. Basically anything that can create a lot of skulls that likes to have a lot of mana, or just like a really high mana cost in general, like 30 plus. It creates a bunch of wild cards while having a decent Devour rate. Biggest issue with this is you're generally not going to have a lot of wild cards, if any at all, at the starting board, meaning it takes a little while before him to kind of shuffle his higher Devour rate. So he starts very, very slow, which is a bit of a liability. You can't really like run him in first slot, because especially in early game if you're running a low rarity team, because he'll likely die before he can actually get his first Devour. But you can run him in like second, even third, even go replace your Atlantas with him if you wanted to. This will allow you to have all things that can kill one at a time, Wild Knight killing one at a time, as well as the Centaurs killing one at a time. The only big issue with it is, for one, you don't really have a good way to curse to get rid of immune to Devour. So if you're up against a team that has immune to Devour, or something that you can't even get rid of that has immune to Devour, like the Dooms that are in Underspire, you have no way to really utilize them against that compared to Atlanta or Wild Knight. And other than that, he's just really inconsistent at devouring, so you can end up casting him like 3 times and still not get a single Devour when you really, really want him to, especially if you're using him further up in your team. So for the most part, I just didn't really show him with it because it's a lot more consistent running Wild Knight in Atlanta, which is also a bit cheaper. Anyways, beyond that, as far as faction teams, actually, I think I showed this as the exact same one. I think this is my only duplicate team here, but this is actually the same one we showed for the other one. It's just Rowan Quick Kill, just running Black Mana go into pretty much as standard of a Rowan team as you can get. Running Archer, but of course you can run any hero class you still need EXP for. For the higher rarity team, we're just running a double Tesla, doing this with Leprechaun to get the mana going, as well as Wand for mana, but if you don't have Wand, of course, you can just run pretty much anything you want, or Scare Shield, any mana accumulation option, anything to tank with. Final team that we have here, or not final team that, but we have here, but final for the faction, is the Weekend Faction event. Obviously has a different pure faction team. For this, we're going to be running the Horned Guardian. Very important that he never dies. He is very vital to winning the final fight. And even though we don't double up on him, very much make sure he does not die. Luckily, he has a lot of ways to do so. He has a 50% score reduction. He gains a bunch of armor and barrier. Unfortunately, unlike the thing we were showing earlier, he only gains armor and barrier and not attack value like the other guy does. So he doesn't really get to scale his offense. He only scales his defense. He also gets to knock a random enemy to the back, but not as relevant. Mostly just want to make sure he survives the whole time. Main thing that you're going to be using are the Mechatars. The main reason why the Mechatars are so relevant is due to their silence. There's an independent 30% chance to silence each affected enemies of the 3 that ends up hitting. And this is really good for making sure that the enemy can't really do anything to you. Not only will you be silencing the enemy's Mechatar, you'll also be silencing their Horned Guardian, so it doesn't keep gaining barrier and durability. And you can also end up silencing things like their actual big damage sources that can kill you at the higher range, especially if you have lower stats. So basically, you just want to keep silencing everything, just to make sure that they can't really pressure you at all. And of course, you want to be using one of the legends. This is mostly to give the 2 Mechatars 50% mana start. This is also why you won't be using the new troop that's coming out that we just showed earlier. This one that does a little bit of extra damage, because it's way better to have the silence spam than it is to have a little bit extra damage. You're going to get far more value just from getting that little bit extra silence over and over again and keeping them perpetually silenced than you are from just slightly higher marginal damage. And this guy, you can also use his damage, so you technically don't even really need the other one. It also gets to stun all affected enemies, and it also gets to jumble the enemy team. So a lot of things that can end up completely removing the enemy order. It's also one of the reasons why you really want those Mechatar silences as well, as you want to make sure your Horned Guardian does not leave your first slot. It is pretty important that it stays there. It's not going to be the end of the world if it happens on the final fight, but it can be really annoying if it happens on the first fight. So do be wary of that, and it's kind of the whole reason why you need that silence spam so much. And then the Halloween doll. So I will be covering this a little bit more in depth tonight when we do the stream, as we always do. However, I do want to show it at least once with one team here, just kind of as a first impressions kind of thing. Overall, this legend, as I mentioned earlier, pretty situational. Not the greatest, not the worst. Definitely a great utility troop, though, and honestly, one of the best ways to apply Terror in the current state of game. Terror, 10% chance every single turn that you'll end up moving the slot. So every single one of these has a 10% chance to move down. And the very last slot has a 10% chance of dying every single turn. One nice thing about Terror as well is it does immediately apply, unlike Deathmark and similar insta-kill mechanics currently in the game, even Lycanthropy, which have a 1-turn delay. This has a no-turn delay, so this turn that they did their turn on, there was a 10% chance that would die, but if that was Deathmark or Lycanthropy, they would not have triggered their 10% or 15% chance to trigger. But Terror does get that immediate possibility. The other benefit of this is that means you can spam Terror with no downside. For example, if you were to go spam Deathmark on something that's already Deathmarked, you're basically refreshing their timer, so there will be a 1-turn delay for them not being able to be killed. So for example, if I was to Deathmark something that's already Deathmarked, their next turn they would have a 0% chance of dying, even though they were already Deathmarked. However, with Terror, if we go reapply Terror, there's still a chance the immediate turn that it still dies to that Terror, if I could ever give up my turn to hopefully show it. Come on, I want to see at least one Terror kill. There's a good chance we're not going to get it, just because 10% is pretty low, but come on, I want to see it. Give us a Terror kill. Come on, come on. Come on. Yeah, there we go. The finish on the Terror kill. So that's basically how you want to use her. You want to use her with insta-kill things or skull spam because you're whittling them down one at a time. And ideally, you just get a free kill off a Terror like we just did there. That's pretty much our whole premise. So she's really good with like Zolgoth, Immortal Ossifer, you know, anything that has insta-kill, anything that has skull spam, anything that kills like one at a time. She's really good support for that while having a lot of mana accumulation, decent at tanking, 45% skull dodge, mixed tank with the spell reduction. Overall, not too bad. Very situational, as killing one at a time is a bit more situational these days just because Stellarix does like infinite damage per cast infinitely. So there's a little bit less instances where you can kind of get away with skull spam teams. But I could definitely see her being a tank in a lot of skull spam teams when your overall skull damage isn't necessarily something that matters because you already have so much because of Wild King and just other similar options that you might be using on a team. So in situations where you don't need like a 3x multiplier on your skull spam team or something similar like that, or like Slayer and Rage and all that kind of things that just give you like infinite damage on you per skull. In situations where you don't really need that, she can end up being a really good skull spam team tank. So I feel like this could probably be her main use case going forward. And of course, any kind of Terror Boost Ratio team or similar, or even just Midnight Restriction in general. I could even see her coming up in Construct and Mystic because Construct, of course, have Lord or Slaughter when it comes to that. Mystic, I don't think is as good of an option. There's like one double converter and maybe something else I'm forgetting. But yeah, I can really see her having some good Lord or Slaughter into her kind of synergy. Though they do have a little bit of mana conflict, but that can also be an upside in that they have more categories that they can do if it's like a color restriction like green or blue, for example. But anyways, guys, that will be a full rundown on everything. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. All of the teams that we went over are in the description, and the only teams we didn't go over were all the haunted Halloween events, which somewhere's on screen right now should be the video that brings you to those teams. I think we showed 3 of them last Friday. But anyways, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week, and I will catch you guys later. Goodbye, everyone, and thanks for watching.